is a house built out of stone, wooden floors, walls, and window sills, tables and chairs warmed by all of the dust. This is a place where I don't feel alone. This is a place where I feel at home.
We're actually going to hear from another UFC fighter and Bellator star and former light heavyweight world champion, Phil Mr. Wonderful Davis. And before we hear from Phil, we're going to take a look at some of his career highlights.
Presenting Phil Mr. Wonderful Davis. He's in huge trouble, and it's over. Oh my God! Over! Jason thought giving the extra time, but it was never in doubt.
This guy is dangerous everywhere.
Nice fight! Waldo, Kimbo, and Phil Davis finally got one in.
All right. What a great highlight reel. I love how it seemed like in one of those takedowns, you actually had a little air there. You got some height, almost looked like a little bit of gymnastics there. So let's see. Let's bring on Phil. There you are.
I was slipping.
Well, it was amazing. That made for some good entertainment there. So it's great to have you. Thank you so much, Phil, for being here today, and good talking to you again. And so I know that you have a very unique story, and I'd love for you to share that with our audience today. What are some of the experiences that you've had in dealing with mental health, going back to your days as a champion college wrestler?
All right. So before I was a mixed martial artist, I was a collegiate wrestler and I wrestled in high school and junior high. And going into my senior year, I was just bombarded with pressure. My junior year, it was one of my best seasons. And then I just completely fell apart in the postseason. And I trained to get better all summer long. And as September and fall season, preseason kind of came around, I just fell apart. The pressure of needing to win, which it had never been that for me. I was simply having fun. I was wrestling, something I loved to do. I enjoyed it. And over the course of like probably, 1 or 2 weeks, I went from training 2 to 3 times a day to barely making it to a class a day, telling my coach I can't make it to practice. And right away, my coach said, Phil, I think you need to see the sports psychologist. It was very, very, very not like me. And it was just...
All right. Well,
are we good?
I think so. I'm not sure what happened. But
oh my God, that scared me so bad. I didn't know what I thought was about to happen.
That was a sound effect for the anxiety.
Right?
Just a reminder, yes.
For anybody watching, that was for dramatic effect. That's basically how I felt. That's basically how I felt. And so over a course of 2 weeks, I had fallen apart. The idea that over the course of my young adult life, I had built myself into becoming the best wrestler I can be. And this is my last chance to win a national title. And I felt the pressure of, this is your last chance. And if you don't do this, your whole life up until this point has been wasted. You've just wasted 15 years of your life.
Wow.
Yeah, it was just a lot to
A lot of
sit
pressure.
on. Right. And then within me, I had this feeling of, you know, almost that instead of using that energy to push me further and try harder, it almost felt like you should just quit. You should just not try. And man, I'm not like a big crier. Very few things move me to tears, and I just found myself, I couldn't read. I would just stare at the book. And thank God we had a sports psychologist, very, very seasoned vet, just a really great person to talk to. We probably had 10 to 15 sessions. And I mean, I think he not only changed my life in the immediate, but really laid down some foundation for some lasting habits to understand what pressures and feelings I'm having inside, and how I encounter those, and how do I make sense of them.
I love what you're sharing, because I think a lot of people think of anxiety as, like the sweaty palms, the racing heart, but I really like what you share, because you're talking about the other experiences of ways that anxiety can manifest. And also, a lot of people think that anxiety is a result of like being like weak in a way, or not having will, or not having, confidence. And you had all of that. You were at the top of your game, and it still got you. And the effects that you had was almost like, like not being able to read, not being able to focus, and it took another person saying like, you are not yourself. So just once, Phil, you keep bringing these sound effects here. I don't know what that one was.
It's like that. That nails on the chalkboard. That's the feeling. I also want to point out, during that time, I was the number one ranked wrestler at my weight class in the nation, and yet it still felt impossible to do the thing that most predicted that I might do. It was the pressure of so many things.
I love that. And I think that that's so important, because that's really what I'd say, that anxiety almost creates a system override, where you're not able to do the thing that that you can do, that becomes natural to you. And the chat's going crazy. I think somebody has their hand on it. But there was a question for you up there that I want to make sure that I ask. So the question was, we'll have to decipher that one. But this one was, did you ever feel like, as a Black male, that you didn't want to see a therapist or admit that you were dealing with mental health? And I guess in light of that question, maybe you could also talk about, if that were or weren't the case, what did you do to cope with the anxiety, either with therapy or without?
Right. So let's start with that question, and then we'll lead into your questions. Definitely there was, I think there was maybe a cultural stigma around it. And when we say mental health, it doesn't mean that you maybe necessarily need medication, or that you are necessarily diagnosed with a lasting issue. It simply means that, you have more on your plate at that present moment than you maybe know what to deal with. You have stressors that you're not dealing with efficiently. And I was very reluctant. I thought this might be for people who need more than I do. I have so much to be thankful for. Maybe I don't need to be wasting this guy's time. By the way, his name was Dave Ukelson. He's a great doctor. I don't know if he's still at Penn State. I suspect not, but fabulous sports psychologist. But some of the tips that he gave me were really taking the time to think through exactly what was bothering me, and not only using that to kind of fuel my passion for wrestling, but also, separating the real things from the fake things. When I was in college, many years ago, Facebook had just become a thing. It was still the Facebook at the time, if you are familiar. And so, the way that people would talk about it was the beginning, like forums were there, forums were around, and that's the first time you really encountered like a lot of people who would just dump bad information on your lap. Like, oh, this guy's terrible. This guy sucks. He'll never win. Like, oh, I go to this website. You really have to be able to wade through that stuff. And I know Angela is really big about keeping her circle small. And to maybe just kind of touch on that for a moment, I only allow, information from a set amount of people. So if everyone says I'm awesome and I'm unbeatable, and I'm the best thing since sliced bread, all of that is great, and I thank you. However, I cannot ingest that information. I only need to hear from my team, and those people can be critical of me, and those people can give me praise. Those people can tell me I did a great job. But typically those people say a little bit of both. I'm like, man, you knocked them out in 5 seconds, but maybe not your cleanest punch.
Right.
So, and that's the type of feedback I want. I need honesty, and I need people to be straightforward with me. And as a side note, I think just having people in your life that are willing to be honest with you is always a good thing.
Those are really good tips, and I know that that Angela and I had spoke about that yesterday. So I appreciate you bringing that back. About the importance of your circle and who you take influence from. And I think that you've given some really great advice to to people out there, whether it's African American males or fighters or just the population in general. And I'd love to show the audience for now the one of the reels from when you won the light heavyweight title and when you had to defend it. And I think as we talked about it yesterday, that you had shared that you had actually been experiencing anxiety prior to this. Is that right?
Oh, yeah.
And so what we see on the outside can sometimes be really different. So I really just appreciate you sharing with the audience what was going on the inside, because I think we often assume that we're the only ones going through that.
Right.
So, yeah.
So, did you have a clip or no?
Yeah, I think we've got a clip. Yeah, so this is the clip of when you won the light heavyweight title.
But the night was about 205, the long-awaited light heavyweight world title fight. It is rare, Jimmy, that a fight that you envisioned, a perfect game, plays out exactly that way. It did for Phil Davis.
Yeah, we knew Phil Davis would have the takedown advantage, national champion wrestler, but his jiu-jitsu on point, passing at will against Liam McGeary, and once he was there, vicious ground and pound, threatening for submissions over and over again, keeping the champ on the defensive.
And in our main event on Spike, it was a rematch between Phil Davis and Ryan Bader. Jimmy, Phil Davis, the light heavyweight champion.
That's right, Phil Davis coming forward, trying to use his strikes. Ryan Bader having his moment with his straight punches. Neither fighter really finding their offense throughout an awkward fight. Ryan Bader getting a couple of takedowns, but not able to hold Phil Davis down. It was back and forth, a lot of angles, a variety of strikes.
Yeah, well, I know, Phil, you're not coming back on now, but I just want to thank you for what you shared. And it was just really a pleasure to talk with you and to see this reel and for us to just get an inner glimpse into what's kind of underneath the surface of a fighter and that's just had to, as a champion fighter. So I just wanted to say thank you one more time. And yeah, for sure. So next, we're going to hear some tips from mental health therapist, Dr. Shareefah Al Uqdah. And so we'll go ahead and bring Dr. Uqdah on, and I'll let her introduce herself, and then we'll get into hearing some tips from her.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Dr. Shareefah Al Uqdah. I'm a licensed psychologist located in Washington, D.C. And I currently am also a professor at Howard University. And my not-for-profit is called Your Neighborhood Clinic. Thank you, athletes. Thank you, Phil. Thank you, Angela, for sharing your stories. I think that you all have really highlighted a lot of the ways in which anxiety shows up for everyone, but also athletes specifically. It's very important to know that anxiety is one of the most common mental health illnesses that individuals will be diagnosed with throughout their lifetime. It is also important to know that the seeds of anxiety, and quite frequently anxiety disorders, can be diagnosed within children. Issues such as mutism or separation anxiety is quite frequent in children. And so a lot of times individuals may have the precursor of anxiety, which may build up as they continue throughout their life. One of the things that Phil and Angela talked about also that is important when understanding anxiety is sort of that pre-existing trauma that may exist where you have begun to think about things in a way that they have described as this pressure. And so all of a sudden, the excessive fear and worry about failure, about evaluation, about not being good enough can sort of capsize our otherwise mental health and create an anxiety disorder. One of the things that Phil's story pointed out was the idea that anxiety very frequently is coupled with avoidance. So individuals will no longer want to show up, want to complete activities. They may stay away from friends and families that they once enjoyed, competitions, exercises that they once enjoyed. In addition, there also anxiety may frequently be coupled with physical symptoms. So the normal sweaty hands that Michelle talked about may be maxed if you're an athlete because you're frequently sweating, right? You're constantly sweating, you're constantly exerting your body, but the mental parts of that excessive worry and anguish about a future outcome will arise. One of the things that I also want to point out in terms of anxiety is that anxiety differs from normal transient fear, right? Like you may have a thought like, oh my God, should I get on this roller coaster? That is different from actual anxiety where it can be crippling and debilitating and is oftentimes persistent and lasts for long periods of time. Anxiety may also occur with other disorders such as depression, such as PTSD, and some of the other disorders that you all may be familiar with. When we're thinking about how to cope and how to manage anxiety, it's very important that you engage in what I just generally call good wellness routine, right? So we want a good sleep hygiene. We want a good social support, which the athletes talked about. We also want to make sure that we are eating well, but also engaging in activities such as exercise, such as deep breathing and relaxation that we know helps calm the body. Second, when we are talking about treating and working with anxiety, we want to make sure that we unpack our mental story. What is the story that we tell ourselves about what is happening? Phil sort of alluded to this idea of the therapist helping him figure out what was real and fake. Because the thought is that Phil probably had created a story of failure, a story of not being able to succeed, a story of everyone abandoning him and no longer thinking that he can do these things. And so when you're dealing with anxiety, you really do want to work on that mental story that you have created about the future, knowing that the future isn't written yet. So you are perfectly able to write and have the story that you want. And I always tell my clients, if you are the author of your story, you might as well write yourself being the winner, right? You might as well write yourself coming out on top. You might as well write yourself being the victorious one. And so a lot of anxiety works around thinking about that story that you tell yourself, as well as developing behaviors that will support your overall wellness. If any of you all are experiencing anxiety in any shape, form, of course, reach out for a therapist, but also engage of some of those practices that we talked about. Again, good hygiene, good social support, engaging in physical activity that includes not only exercise, but deep breathing. You can also purchase a lot of anxiety workbooks that will walk you through the steps to unpack your stories and unpack some of the way that you may be imagining the future. And I think that is my time.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Shareefah. That was just so much of a wealth of valuable information. And I think that you really, nailed some of these ideas and theories down to help people understand what they're experiencing, what anxiety might look like. And I think that, from what you shared, we understand that anxiety can be almost a reaction to a stressor. And it also can be a combination of a reaction to a stressor where your mind creates a story and almost makes the situation elevated or puts more pressure on the situation. I think you gave a really great description of all the ways that effect. I'm not even going to say those symptoms, because I really want to make sure that we destigmatize mental health and mental health, conditions, because it doesn't necessarily mean that you have a disorder. Anxiety is a way of relating to stress. And I think what we're learning from this conversation today is that we all experience stress. Even the people that, are champion fighters and that have had a ton of success experience anxiety, even if it doesn't look like it on the outside. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And I just want to add real quick that just because this keeps coming up, this idea of pressure, right? So a lot of times we think that pressure is motivating us, right? Like we need the pressure in order to be motivated. But what research says is that there's a limit to that. That once you reach a level of so much pressure, what happens is you actually break down. Think about a car, right? If you continue to rev the engine, that gasket is going to blow. It's going to go hot. And we are the same way. So I always encourage us to be motivated by good things, right? I am motivated to train this hard because it feels good for my body. I am motivated to compete because I enjoy competing. I am motivated to perform and to show up because it actually feels good for me, as opposed to letting pressure be a motivating factor, because you never know when that pressure is going to be too much. Thank you. And I'm Dr. Shareefah.
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Shareefah. And I think that we saw that both in Angela and in Phil's story. And the people think that once you become successful or once you hit that level of achievement that you've been striving for, that the anxiety or the pressure or the stress will actually become less. And so I love that you shared that, because I think both Angela and Phil's story shared that, almost once they got to that level, that they might have crossed that threshold where the stress actually and the pressure became more, and it created that imbalance. So I love that. Thank you.